welcome to our podcast. Today's podcast is going to be dedicated to pension and pension reform. And as most of you know and are struggling with, the pension issue is hot and heavy in school districts, as well as very important for our members. And the legislature has vowed that they're going to take up this issue, and hopefully we're going to have some pension reform before the end of the school year. Because as most of you know, the districts are seeing about a 21.5% increase right now, which is having a huge hit on school district budgets once again. So something needs to be done for the local school districts as well as the taxpayers as well. So we want to talk a little bit about the pension. My name is Paul Healy. I'm the Executive Director-elect of the Pennsylvania Principals Association, and we have Dr. Bill Hartman here, who is the Executive Director. So we're going to have a conversation about pension, and Bill, we want to kind of start off with, because this was one that I didn't really understand too, but it's one that if you could clear it up for our members. What is the difference between a defined benefit plan and a defined contribution plan?
Thank you, Paul. A defined benefit plan is just what it says. You have a set amount of money you will receive, and you know what that is going to be. Right now, for most of our members, that's 2.5% times the number of years that they've worked, provided there are no penalties for age. When they reach 35 and 55, there's no penalty. So if you have 35 years, you take 2.5% times that, and that money is guaranteed for the rest of your retirement. That's defined benefit. Defined contribution is quite different. In a defined contribution plan, the only thing that is set in stone is how much you will put in, how much the district will put in, and how much the state will put in. If you had been in a defined contribution plan when the collapse happened in 2007-8, you could have lost half or all of your money. So you could be retiring with little or no pension, because there is no defined benefit. Our system is a defined benefit, and there are reasonable arguments both ways. The argument you will hear is that all business is going to a defined contribution system. I think our treasurer, McCord, explained that the best. He said, when testifying before the Senate, there's a reason that industry is going to that. The reason being that they want to put all the risk with the employee and take none of the risk themselves. The question is, should the state be in such the same type of mode?
So one's high risk and one's low risk. And right now, for the people that have been in the system, we're at very low risk, knowing that, you know, right now when we retire, we know the money's going to be there. But in a defined, as you just explained, a defined contribution plan, it could or could not be there depending on what the market is at any given time and whether it's volatile. Is that correct?
That's correct, whether it's volatile, whether you're a good investor, if you have choices. There's another problem with a defined contribution plan. Some states define who you can go with, and they take a cut of that profit. So, for example, if you were with Case Margolis or Lincoln or Vanguard or now in your 403B, they may say, well, you have to go with this company. Now, that's not in the law yet, but states look to that because they can make money from getting the right vendor. So that's another thing to consider.
So we know that the legislation and also the governor wants to push this issue. He wants another win. We all know that. And so they have vowed, and we've heard through different organizations, that this is one of their top priorities coming back to session this winter season into the spring, and they want to get something done. And we've seen a couple ideas that have been floated out by the various congressmen or senators. The one that we're familiar with, especially where we're located, is the one from Cumberland County from Representative Glenn Greal. So can you explain what his plan would do or would not do for people?
Sure. Let me begin by saying what Corbett's plan and then comparing the two Grills. Corbett is asking for a 401k-like defined contribution plan with no defined benefits. So that's what we described earlier. There is the problem that McCord pointed out related to that is it actually increases the debt and doesn't decrease it, because debt is accumulated because of those of us that are already in the system or have retired. All it does is change what happens to new people entering the system. And secondly, assures that the money that those new people had been putting into our system that helps support retirees no longer goes there. Glenn Grill has an interesting proposal that's been reviewed by us in PSEA, and we're withholding comment because the devil is always in the details. In Grill's plan, which is the most moderate of the plans that I've seen, many legislators and leadership in both the Senate and the House like the 401k type plan that the governor is proposing. But in Grill's plan, he calls for sacrifice on the part of all people. And here is the way that he does that. Number one, for an employee, what they would do instead, now when you retire, your salary that they calculate your retirement on is based on the 3 highest years you've had in the system. The proposal is to extend that. So instead of 3 highest years, it would probably be 5 highest years. No one set that in stone. Maybe they're thinking 7, but 5 is the number we hear the most. This, of course, would reduce the amount of your retirement, but not significantly for most people. The second item that affects employees, that is very affects you greatly, is that they would eliminate your cash payment at the end. Currently, when you retire, you're entitled to withdraw all the cash that you contributed plus the interest that was accumulated from that cash. They would, under this proposal, not permit you to do that.
Which is called the lump sum option.
It's a lump sum, yes. And the lump sum can be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars for most people. Now, they are not taking it from you completely in that plan. They just don't allow you to withdraw it. It remains in your system and increases. You get about 6% on that money that goes towards your retirement. The third item that, if it's not there, then for employees, I see almost no benefit by compromising, is the state would immediately put $9 billion, borrow it in a bond, and contribute it to the retirement system, which would eliminate about $15 to $17 billion worth of the future debt that they're talking about. And remember, when they throw these numbers around, $47 billion, it's future debt. The system is not in trouble at this state. It's future debt. So that would eliminate maybe $15 billion because you would hopefully gain more money than lose through the borrowing. The final thing, and this is where the devil is in the details, they talk about a new system for new employees. Now, we need to point out that 2 years ago, Act 180 was passed, which gave new employees a new system. When our treasurer, McCord, testified before the Senate, I don't know if this was Senate testimony, let me scratch that, but when he has said, and others have said, that if that system is allowed to play itself out, it should totally stabilize the system. And that the percentages that districts and state would be paying would be in the 3 to 4% range.
Just for the new people, though, correct?
Well, as the new people grow
Right,
older,
right.
the whole system would stabilize.
Right.
So in essence, they solved the problem for the new people, which shows you that the problem is the $40 billion that we have.
So as you know, we get a lot of questions, so you explained very clearly on how it's going to affect people presently still working and in the system, and what some of the proposals would do to them. But you know, as well as I do, we get a lot of calls from our retirees as well. And they're certainly hurting because, especially depending on when you retire, there hasn't been no cost of living increase to the pension system for some while, nor do we foresee anything on the horizon for that. So the question from them is, can they mess with my pension? And I guess our response has been, that would take a court order to be able to do that. Is that still correct?
Well, it's somewhat correct, but let me explain a little bit about what everyone is guaranteeing it won't affect those retired. Most are guaranteeing it would not affect those veterans in the current system. Most are saying that. That doesn't mean that's what will come out. But let's talk a little bit so you understand. This crisis, in part, was created not just by the stock market failure, but the state's failure for over a decade to meet their actuarial obligations. Actuaries actually look at these numbers and they say, this is what you must pay this year. And the state continually says, oh yeah, but we're only going to pay this much, and by the way, districts, we're cutting you a break. So, in essence, the employer has created the crisis by failure to pay, the failure to meet actuarial standards. Okay? Now that the crisis is created, they have motivation to change the whole system. What I say to retirees is, yes, they're saying they're not touching you. Veterans are saying they're not touching you. But I need a few explanations. First explanation is, if they switch to a 401 type system, where all new monies go into the employee's account, how do they replace the money that's no longer coming into your retirement system? How do they do that? Secondly, they already have a $47 billion debt. How do they eliminate that? What I fear is a second crisis later on down the road after the changes also created because of their actions that says, you know what, you're the problem now. And so I don't see it in the near future, but I'm a little bit leery about it.
One of the things that we have two sponsors, as you know, corporate sponsors that deal a lot with investments, and we get our advice from them, both Lincoln Investment and Cades Margolis. Cades Margolis is our sponsor for the elementary folks that we have and our members, and Lincoln handles our secondary members. And just recently, I think they both made a good point to our board members in saying that while our pension system, we have a great pension system for retirees in the state of Pennsylvania. Certainly it has a deficit right now, but for those people that have gotten to retirement and enjoyed retirement, they get a good monthly check and they've enjoyed the lump sum. However, what they've explained is that you cannot just rely on your pension alone in those years as you're living. And one of the interesting things that they just pointed out to us, and I think you would agree with this, is that the life expectancy age is now 87 years of age. So if you retire when you're about 55, you're going to be drawing retirement for about 30 plus years now. And so what happens as you start getting your checks in the first 5, 10, 15 years, it looks pretty good. But because there are no cost of living increases and inflation rises, you'll soon be behind the 8 ball again with not a lot of money coming in to cover your expenses without supplementing your pension. And so both of those organizations have talked to us about making sure that our members understand that it's never too late, and that while new people don't really think about retirement because they think, oh, our pension's going to take care of us, they should be socking money away in some other accounts. And both of those organizations have 401ks, 403bs, and the 401 Roth programs, which will allow people to put some extra money aside, tax-free or after taxes, either way, depending on which item that you choose, so that when you're in your later years and that pension check looks smaller and smaller because of its buying power now, in our economy, that you're going to have to supplement it. And certainly Social Security isn't going to be enough to do that. So they're telling everybody is, please reach out to them. They can explain. And both organizations told us they're very willing to come into districts and explain this to administrators. So all you have to do is give us a call. We can put you in contact with them as well. So anything else, final thoughts on pension?
I just think that for those of you who are younger and the veterans, now is the time for you to be contacting your legislator and letting them know how you feel and that you want your pension protected. That would create a reaction. And I would just suggest a couple points that you need to make. First of all, that you have a contract. You signed a contract. You had to sign and select the style of contract. And your organizations, of course, would fight in court that that's what happened, and there's an obligation to honor the contract. So that alone is a good business practice. You're in business, you honor contracts. That's number one. Number two is that your groups allow Act 180 to take effect, and in fact it can correct the problem if they leave it do so. Number three is the state, any kind of solution needs to have some kind of guarantee that the state and the districts or the employers will meet their actuarial obligations so that we don't end up in this kind of a state again. That's for a beginning. Your legislators will listen to you. They are not set in stone, and even though 90% of them agree something has to be done, there is no agreement on what should be done. So now's the time. And our website provides your legislators' location, phone number, and contact numbers.
So hopefully you gained some information, especially the difference between a defined benefit program and a defined contribution plan. And certainly, as your organization, we're certainly supporting the defined benefit plan as we go forward. We'll be watching that very, very carefully. Again, as Dr. Hartman mentioned, you want to continue to come back to our website because as things get rolled out through different plans and proposals, we will be posting those on our website for you as well. So I want to thank Dr. Hartman for, because he's our in-house expert on the pension system. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to call our office just to ask Dr. Hartman some additional questions about pension, or if you're interested in investing.